Welcome back. This is Exopolitics TV. I'm Alfred Lamont Weber, and today we have an extraordinary guest, Wynn, who's coming to us from Sedona, Arizona. Welcome, Wynn.
Hey, Alfred. I am so honored to be your guest today.
And I feel particularly honored. Wynn is an extraordinary being. He is an artist and a poet, and he's a researcher and author in the dimensional ecology, excuse me, and has been working in the dimensional ecology. His most recent work has been with a positive group of souls in other dimensions who have been showing us how they interface with our realm. And Wynn's first experience with this was writing a book, which I have just read. It's a very powerful book. It's called The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, ? Interdimensional Communication and Global Transformation, which he's the principal author, and there are contributions there by another individual. Would you like to mention him?
David Wilcock.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm just going to ask, tell us how you came into this project, which is more than a project. It really is your entry into the whole area of interacting with positive groups of souls in the dimensional ecology.
This all started about 35 years ago when I was a nerdy, skeptical physics major at the University of California in Berkeley. And when I was a kid, I was a ham radio operator. And one of my greatest thrills was coming home from school, getting on my ham radio, and talking to people all over the world. And so I thought, well, I have this aptitude towards this. Maybe I'm supposed to be an engineer. And then when I went to Berkeley, I was going to be a physics major. And somehow at Berkeley, things transformed. I had my first girlfriend who was a Bohemian artist, and she had Edgar Cayce books all around. And I was skeptical, but I would pick them up and I'd say, oh my God, this guy was real. Nobody could have faked this. That's what I would normally think. My father would say, what's their angle? So I said, no one could do 15,000 readings, have this much accuracy. And so I became what's the word? A vacuum cleaner for Edgar Cayce books. I probably read 30 of them. And at the same time, I was starting to write songs. And I never thought of myself as that as an avocation. But I wanted to learn how the universe works. And so I had a rock and roll band. I traveled around with my girlfriend who showed me Edgar Cayce, and we were a duo. And at that time, we were having this amazing, I guess we could call ourselves hippie emissaries. My hair was like down to here, and we would arrive in a town, and we'd go into the local bar, and everyone would say, look, it's hippies from San Francisco. And they'd put me up, and we'd perform, and they'd throw money at us, they'd buy us drinks. And we spent about 2 years doing this, and it was magical. I mean, I was a nerdy physics person who suddenly jumped into this universe abyss, and I was having synchronicities and little miracles. And then I said, we came back to Berkeley, and it all got boring. And so I said, I really want to know how all this works. And I started hitchhiking around the country with a bunch of astrology books and my guitar. And it was quite scary. I mean, I was fairly vulnerable and I didn't feel that powerful in the world. But I just, if there's a God, then this will prove it to me. And I had miracle after every day was like a synchronicity. And after about 3 years of doing this, and I was playing music at coffee shops and colleges, I said, man, I want to put this in my music, and I want to tell the world that there's this whole other reality going on. And I went to Hollywood to be successful. And I ended up having some songs recorded, and I ended up becoming in connection with this very, very famous songwriter who I now know we had a past life together. I didn't know it at the time, but he loved me. And I like to say the example of the kind of synchronicities that were occurring for me at this time. His name was Brian Holland. He was a black guy who was one of Holland Dozier Holland, who did all the songs for the Supremes. And I had dropped the tape off in his office. I ran into him at a coffee shop right afterwards. And then he said, I'll have to listen to your music. And then I had like 2 or 3 more synchronicities. And I had a meeting with him and his brother. And they would say, this guy is good. Boy, he writes good lyrics. And they had me coming into their office and we wrote some things together. And then I used to go down to Venice every day. I was not very disciplined. I was living like an artist. And one day I walked up and down the beach in Venice. Are you familiar with Venice, Alfred?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the bohemian.
Oh, yes. There's a part of my life where I lived in West Hollywood and produced movies.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So here I am. It was the end of a very hot day in Venice, and I went into a bar, which I never do. It's called the Sunset Saloon. I sat down next to this woman who was getting drunk next to me, and she actually started talking to me. And I probably have had this fantasy, but this is the only time it ever happened. She took me home with her. And her name, I won't say her name, if she's listening, but I started seeing her. And a month later, she moved into a fairly high-class apartment building called the Marina City Club, rented a room from her girlfriend, and I continued seeing her. And I left her house one morning, her apartment, and I walked down the hallway, and there was an envelope on the door next to hers, addressed to Brian Holland. Mm. And she moved next door to Brian Holland. And I mean, this is in Los Angeles, 8 million people. I meet a woman at a bar who takes me home with her. And a month later, she moves next to Brian Holland. And I'm already going into their office. And, I think Brian said, God must have sent you. He gave me the key to his office. He said, use our stationery and make yourself successful. And I was sure I was going to be successful. I was sure. It was like God was laying out this red carpet. The songs, Brian Holland at that time probably had more hits than anybody next to the Beatles. He was responsible for all the classic Motown songs. I Hear a Symphony, Standing in the Shadow of Love, Reach Out, I'll Be There, and the Four Tops and the Supremes. And so, they treated me like an equal. And you know what? We never had a business relationship. We never signed a contract. It was totally like, how can I say it? Not like Hollywood, all right? Not like Hollywood at all. And eventually, I'm doing this thing there, and I had a song get stolen, not from him, but from somebody in Nashville. It became a huge hit, and I freaked out, and I said, "What happened to God?" I thought I was protected. I was having so many magical things, and I dropped out of music, and I thought I was going to go back. I said, I'm going to make a bunch of money. I tried to make a bunch of money, and the guy went bankrupt, owing me a bunch of money, and my life hit the skids, and I ended up selling things at swap meets for the next 25 years. And I couldn't get out of it. And I was in San Diego at the end of a show, and I was in an RV driving all over Southern California. And I said to myself, if I have to do this for the rest of my life, I'd rather die now. And so I took a little notepad and I started writing poems. And I said, geez, I can still write poetry. Wow. And so I started sending the poems out over the internet, and people started sending me emails. I love your poems. I stuck it on my refrigerator. It cheers me up. And then I was sending it to some metaphysical magazines. And one of the magazines said, would you like to write an assignment for us? Now, I had no idea why they asked me that. In fact, it turns out later it was a mistake, a cosmic mistake. It wasn't a mistake. I was writing poems. I wasn't writing prose. I showed no ability to write prose. But I said yes, and they had me interview this famous author, Dharma Singh Khalsa, who wrote a book called Meditation is Medicine, I believe. And I turned in the interview, and the woman loved it. And she said, we're going to pay you to write an article for us every month. So I started, this was in about 1999, 2000. I was interviewing people like Greg Braden and Uri Geller and God knows who. And at some point in that, I would say about 5 months into it, somebody sent me an email. I'm telling you this story because it's funny. It's like there was an article that was about Saba having sex with his disciples, okay? And it was kind of an expose about how could this guy be a great guru if he's having sex. And so I clicked on the link to see who wrote that article, and I ended up on the website of David Wilcock.
Oh.
and I looked at his website, and he had this little thing called the Edgar Cayce Connection. And I studied it. And then I started reading his readings. And I said, he didn't say he was Edgar Cayce, and he was not very together. I mean, he was like struggling financially. He would put big headlines that said, don't worry, the rent's going to get paid. We're not going out of business. And he was putting up readings at the time. And I studied him, I studied his story, and I said, if this guy is telling the truth, he has to be the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. At which point, I called my editor up, and I said, I think I got the epic story of the century, because I think I found a guy who is Edgar Cayce reincarnated, and he's bringing through all these messages, and it was incredible, and I want to interview him. And I said, look at his website. So she went to his website, and she emailed me back and said, Wynn, I think this guy is a wacko. but if you want to interview him, go ahead. But I'm not going to promise to run it until I read the interview. And so I interviewed David. And I sent her the interview. And she immediately emailed me back and said, oh my God, you're right. He has to be Edgar Cayce. And I think you're supposed to write the book about it. And
wow.
if she didn't say that, I don't think I would have written the book. And I didn't have much money. I stopped doing my other thing. I didn't want to sell things anymore at swap meets and fairs, but I didn't know what to do. And I was living in my RV. Sometimes I was living in my RV on the streets of LA. I would park. I would find the best place to park. I'd go down to the health club and take a shower.
Right.
I was having fun actually.
Oh,
It was.
sure.
I had it down. I mean, and so I had a reading from David at the time. He was doing readings, and the reading was amazing in the way that it keyed into me. And I kept studying his channelings, and I realized something, and it was I didn't know this was true at the time. It was my first thought, and there was implications and innuendos, and I don't believe channelings. You know, if something is wise, I recognize wisdom. But when a source is making all kinds of premises that I can't validate, I put it in my little file cabinet somewhere in my subconscious. I said, I'll take that into consideration, and if it's true, it'll keep coming up and it'll prove itself. Well, with David Wilcock, the source that was talking through him was explaining that they were a group soul, and they were composed of individual souls that had physical lifetimes that graduated or got off the wheel of reincarnation. And here we have a fire engine passing by. Can you hear that?
Oh, yes, I can.
Jerry, will you shut that window? Okay.
This is just to prove that this is a live interview in real time.
Right. So they're a group soul that's made up of graduates, and that they were acting as a helper and a guide for our planet. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. And this was who was speaking through Edgar Cayce. This is who was speaking through David Wilcock. And David was probably a year and a half into this, getting these messages, and he was fairly apprehensive about being public as the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. It was, the responsibility of it was overwhelming. Like, everyone would think he knew all the answers. But I convinced him that writing this book would be a great service and help get his work out. And I think for 2.5 years, we were like fighting our way through it because he really didn't want it to happen, didn't want the book to happen. So I take the responsibility for outing David. And of course, once the book came out, David, everybody knows what happened with David. He's like, he's got millions of people he's influencing. And one of the things that happened is when the book came out, he didn't really want to talk about being Edgar Cayce. And he didn't want to put channelings out into the world. He didn't focus on it. And one of the things they said to David, and I can understand why he felt that way, one of the things this group soul, this alleged group soul, see, I'm not saying to believe it's a group soul. This is one of those things you can't prove. I can tell you they're wise. They're giving incredible wisdom in the book. They're extremely loving. They're extremely compassionate of the human condition. But then they talk about being a group soul and the shift. And that stuff, I had to cross-reference many, many times to say, Uncle, I think they are who they say they are. And how big this was that they said that there were millions of them who had volunteered to come back to Earth and take a body, to be of service here, knowing that once they were here, they would forget where they came from. And they said there's like 70, I would say in 1980, and I'm going to refer to someone else, let's just say probably 80, 100 million of them here. And that once you're here, you don't remember that. You don't know it.
These are referred to as wanderers.
That's right. That's
Right.
right. They're referred to as wanderers. And something in this realm has to waken you up to that realization. But they did give all the signs of this, like people that feel alienated, people that don't fit into normal things, people that have hard time creating the normal ambitions that everyone else has in this realm, people that like science fiction, people that like spirituality, people that are into ETs, tend to be these kinds of people. And when you're here and you're one of them, you don't really feel exalted. In fact, you usually feel just the opposite because you don't fit. And I said, geez, that sounds like me. I know that it was my profile. I didn't fit. I spent most of my life being a rebel, not fitting in. Once I realized I wasn't going to be a physics major or an electrical engineer, I was being an artist, and I was loving traveling, and I was connecting to higher dimensions. And many people that are watching this video, that are attracted to your work, to my work, this kind of work, are very likely wanderers. And those people are the hope of the future. Because when they become awakened, when they can tap into their role, when they can make a connection with their soul family, which is not that hard, suddenly they're on fire, they're on passion, and they can make things happen. And Alfred, I'm sure you're a wanderer.
Yes, that really resonated with me. And a while back, this gentleman who actually runs a website, and his gift is to identify wanderers publicly. And apparently, he had identified me as a wanderer publicly, although I didn't know that. Of course, along with David Wilcock as a wanderer, and he ended up here at my doorstep, along with someone in from Vancouver here, and we had a session here, and I've taped it, at which he introduced me to the whole concept of wanderer, and he said, "Alfred, you're a wanderer," and this
Right.
was just a short while ago, and so this kind of prepared me for reading your book,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was very gratified to have that. If I could just take one more minute of background, the theory of the wanderer is that is a 75,000-year cycle and a 25,000-year cycle, and that is that according to that theory, this planet only had 120 people, souls, graduate in the last cycle. And that was considered an emergency from the universe administration point of view, the soul development point of view. So about 100 million wanderers, souls, volunteered to come here to kind of elevate the planet so that we'd have
Right.
up the quotient of people graduating from this planet. Now, that's a hypothesis, that's a theory, but here we are. Now, back to you.
I wanted to say that you can be a wanderer, and it doesn't mean you do something big and exalted in front of people. Like I now can identify wanderers. And it's like when you go through a supermarket checkout line, and there's a woman who is just blessing everybody that goes by with a big smile. That's a wanderer doing their thing. Wanderers have to be of service in some way in order to fulfill their free birth passion or desire. So they could be a supermarket checkout, they can be an artist, they can be a ambulance driver, they can work in a hospital, various ways. And if you happen to be an old soul wanderer, then you have a lot of wisdom of this realm, because it takes a lot of wisdom of this realm to do the kind of work I'm doing or Alfred is doing publicly, to get through the squiggles of the dark side and not get caught up in it. Because on an earthly level, when you're in front of people and you have attention, that's a commodity. People look at it like you're rich, and they will tempt you because they think you think that as well. And you have to be pretty strong to avoid the temptation, to not be put on a pedestal. And so, you know, I don't think I said this, but there was this implication in the Wilcock channelings, never said outright. There was just one thing that said it, that Jesus was a wanderer from this soul. And that when he said Father, it was this group soul that answered. Now, when I first started studying Wilcock's readings, I said, can this be true? Can this be true? Is this how it works? And they made one comment, and they said that Wilcock let me put in the book because this premise was very, I mean, this is very controversial. But the one comment they made, which is in the book, is we came to you in Christianity, but we don't often speak in those terms anymore because of the way religion screwed it up. And I said, what did they mean by that? We came to you in Christianity. Well, you know, I studied this, I cross-referenced it, and I decided, I'm sure they were who answered when Jesus said, Father, and that Jesus was a co-creation between the being Jesus and this group soul. And we can talk about that later. But
right.
what I wanted to do is I want to tell you what tied Wilcock to Cayce.
Yeah, let's jump in because you've written, it's a 423-page book, and it's very rigorous as far as the science of reincarnation. I started studying parapsychology back in 1973, and I've been, studying the works of Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia Medical School, and all of those regularities that you have to study as far when you start making a case in this, no pun intended, Cayce. So let's start doing that, because I'm sure that there are many viewers who are skeptics at this point. So let's get into the meat of it.
Okay.
Start looking at that.
Let's just briefly mention who Edgar Cayce was.
Yeah.
People that don't know.
Yeah.
Edgar Cayce died in 1945. And for 40 years of his life, he would go into a trance, a voice would speak through him, and people would ask him questions. And it started out where he demonstrated this ability to diagnose people's physical health issues. And he was extremely precise. People would go to the doctor afterwards. He could tell them their blood pressure, their polyps here, whatever. And they go to the doctor, and almost always accurate. And then he would recommend alternative remedies that no one had ever used before in many cases. And the remedies worked. And even today, there are doctors that recommend his remedies. In fact, there's books written about Edgar Cayce's health remedies. And after 20 years of doing health readings, and I should point out that Edgar Cayce started out as a fundamentalist Christian. And when he first started doing these readings, he was scared. You know, Christians are warned against this kind of stuff there, and for good reason, because it could be demonic. And he was scared it was demonic, and he said, if I ever hurt anybody, I'm going to quit. And so for 20 years he did health readings and was helping everybody. And I don't know, this is something that I had a big aha about. He only started doing reincarnation readings after 20 years because they were spoon feeding him. They didn't want to blow him out of the water and suddenly start talking about reincarnation prematurely, because he might have dumped the whole project, because that was not part of a fundamentalist Christian viewpoint. And after 20 years, they started to tell people, the reason you have this problem is because you did thus and thus in a past lifetime, and you had to balance the karma of that. So you've come back with a problem or an issue that balances the karma. And then everybody was asking about past lives. People were asking about how the universe works. And, you know, when he died, he had 15,000 readings. His children opened up a library in Virginia Beach. That many people came to study his readings, including a bunch of skeptical authors who all ended up writing books about Cayce, one of which became a New York Times bestseller. And in the 70s and 80s, millions of people were reading Edgar Cayce. And, there was always a mystery, because what I said earlier about this being a group soul speaking through him never came through him. And he just said it was the source, and he said it was the Christ. And of course, with this new look at things, the idea that Jesus was a member of this group soul, then it ties in with the Christ in a way that, of course, Edgar Cayce never tied it in. It was a mystery. And so now, David Wilcock was living in New Paltz, New York, probably 1996, 1997. He read a book on dreams, and he decided he was going to write his dreams down. And when he woke up in the morning, he found messages, like somebody was talking to him. And they were like little sentence fragments. And he thought he was making it up. But every night he would get more messages. And after a week, one of these messages would predict something that happened to him, that would happen to him in the future. And they said what would happen. They said the time it would happen. They said the day that it would happen. And it happened. Well, David was floored. He said, uh-oh, this isn't me. And he started developing his ability to channel, to get these messages. They were basically at first short sentence fragments, and they became long paragraphs and then pages. And they were I don't think he had a website at that point. And I think he was still in the exploratory stages. And towards the end of 1997, they asked David to move to Virginia Beach, which happens to be where the Edgar Cayce Institute is, the ARE. And David did it. They made enough credibility with him that he moved to Virginia Beach. And sometimes he tells the story of how he got a job selling popcorn at one of the ARE events at that time. But people kept stopping him on the street and saying, "Oh my God, you look just like Edgar Cayce." And he did. He was the spitting image of a young Edgar Cayce. Let me see here.
Yes. That
And
right.
so it really struck David. In fact, he was saying to himself, "Uh-oh." He was not anxious to be Edgar Cayce. And after about 2 months, he had developed his relationship with these voices that were talking to him. And he asked them, could you comment on this? And I'm paraphrasing it. The exact words are in the book. But they said, yes, you are Edgar Cayce. And if you study Edgar Cayce, you'll see all the parallels. But this lifetime, if you're going to do your highest purpose, we would like to ask you to emphasize on teaching the masses universal concepts rather than being a past life health reader. And David went into shock. He started studying Edgar Cayce. Now, this phenomena of looking like your past life, in all my experience of studying metaphysical things, I had never been exposed to it before. And I wasn't ready to believe it, lock, stock, and barrel. But I do now. I'm sure it's true, because I've had too many people in my own life, and I found out some of my own lifetimes that I looked. But how, it's not like you look through history and you say, God, I look like that person. Could I have been him? If you notice the story, David's getting messages. He's got this voice telling him to go to Virginia Beach. And then people start saying, oh my God, you look like Edgar Cayce. The reason it works that way is because in some manner, your soul takes a memory of your DNA. So when the soul comes into a new fetus, it programs the new fetus with the DNA imprint of the past life. Now, you also have your parents, you also have your society, you also have astrology. But the conclusion I came to is, if you had a strong personality, a strong expression, then your past life is going to predominate in the DNA. And we all look like our past lives. Well, Edgar Cayce said in his own readings that you meet the same people from lifetime to lifetime. They keep coming back. And David started studying Edgar Cayce, and he found out that his father had a very close resemblance to Edgar Cayce's father. And he had a friend. I don't think they ended up having a relationship. And it's not my business to say it if they did, but I don't think so. But he had a good friend who looked like Edgar Cayce's wife. And Edgar Cayce, in his own readings, predicted that he would return in 1998, live in Virginia Beach, and may be a liberator of the world. And David's voice seemed to me made that prediction, and then was trying to make David fulfill the prediction by sending him to Virginia Beach in November of 1997, which is an extraordinarily small world for those things to coincide in the right year and everything. And then David's astrology chart. Now, I don't think this is true for everyone. I was thinking, why is this true for Wilcock? And I think it's true because I think they were trying to design him. They were trying. It was obviously it's a co-creation. When you're on the other side, if you're dealing with a positive source, no one tells you what to do. You have to agree to it. But they wanted David to have the same astrology chart as Edgar Cayce, so that if anyone was evaluating this, they'd have to say, yes, he had to be Cayce. So they had 5 planets in the same signs, the 5 personal planets, and there was one chance in 260,000 that that should be the same for both people. And then he's doing these readings, which are way beyond his own level of wisdom. He's putting them up on his website. And I was talking to him all this time, and I said, my God, he couldn't possibly come up with this stuff. You read some of the readings, yes, Alfred?
Of
In the book?
David.
In the
Yes.
book, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was struck. I was struck. First of all, I've read all of David Wilcock's published books, and that is his published trade books, the ones that are published out in the world, and they're extraordinary. And I have something to say about that later in the program. And I read your book, which includes contributions by David Wilcock, and also readings from David Wilcock. And I should say at this point that I was chosen to be the keynote speaker at the 100th anniversary of Edgar Cayce's birth in 1977 in St. John the Divine Cathedral in New York City, because of my work vis-a-vis Edgar Cayce. So I'm familiar with the work of Edgar Cayce and that whole thing. And your work really introduced me to a depth in the David Wilcock soul that I was not familiar with. I was familiar with his published books, but I mean, at the soul level, now I have a much larger comprehension.
You know, many people, when they look at David, they say, I thought Edgar Cayce was this shy, quiet, retiring, humble guy that never cared about money. And when I studied Edgar Cayce, there were many aspects to his personality. Did you ever read Harmon Brough by any chance? Seer Out of Season? Did you ever read that book?
Tell me more.
Seer Out of Season. Harmon Brough lived at the Cayce household.
Okay.
And, he was documenting Edgar Cayce. And he published a few books. Probably the most famous one was A Seer Out of Season. And he was talking about Cayce's personality. And he was saying how he would go into fits of anger. He would resist doing readings because he thought nobody loved him. They only wanted him to go into a trance and bring this information in. And there was a side of Cayce's personality that was not normally presented in other Cayce material. And as I was getting to know David, I was seeing those aspects of Edgar Cayce in David. And also the actual prediction in the Cayce material, where they said he'll return in 1998, live in Virginia Beach, and maybe a liberator of the world. Actually, they didn't say Edgar Cayce would return. They said Ra-Ta would return. And Ra-Ta, in the Cayce readings, was a previous lifetime of Edgar Cayce in Egypt, 10,000 BC. And Ra-Ta was much more active and how would I say it, present than Edgar Cayce was, according to the Edgar Cayce readings. And are you familiar with Ra-Ta?
Well, that's the to the extent that I was introduced uh, in the in your book that Ra was connected to a priest in Egypt in 10,500 BC who had an
Mhm.
affinity with the law of one.
Mhm. One of the things one of the footprints that I found that put this together, because quite frankly, as I was studying this, I kept thinking, I must be making a mistake here. This can't be real. David can't be Edgar Cayce. This can't be a group soul that was working with Jesus. I can't. Why am I doing this? How did I stumble into doing this? I would say for at least 2 years, I kept trying to like discount it, and I would have dumped the project if I could have discounted it because I didn't need to write this book to write a book, and there was an incredible thing that happened that I discovered that just pushed me over the edge. It said, oh my God, this has to be real. David would quote all the time this woman named Carla Ruckert, who had channeled the law of one material, it's called. Actually, she was channeling the same group soul. They called themselves the Ra Group. And in 1981 to 1983, she was in a channeling class in Louisville, Kentucky, and her mentor asked a question about something, and she suddenly went into a trance, which she had never done before, and this voice came through her that said, I am Ra. The nature of your question has brought us forth to reach the depths of the answer that are required. That's my paraphrase. And so there were a series of question and answer sessions that went on for about 3 years. And they're released in a series of 5 books. They're on Amazon. She also gives her books away for free on her website. It's Ra, Law of One. And David believed that he was channeling the same Ra, and it's like, as I was studying David, I started to study Carla Ruckert, and I found something incredible that just blew me away. In the Edgar Cayce readings, they talk about Cayce's past life as Ra-Ta. And Ra-Ta was in Egypt approximately 10,000 BC, and he was a priest, the high priest, and according to the Cayce material, he was doing all these miracles of healing, and he built the pyramids by levitation. And in the Cayce readings, it was said that Ra-Ta became known as Ra, the sun god. And I remembered this very clearly when I studied Cayce when I was younger. Now, in the Cayce readings, they never talked about a group soul, nothing like that, just that Ra was doing healings and built the pyramids by levitation. Now I'm studying the Carla Ruckert readings, and the Ra group, which they identify themselves as such to her, said, we came across a priest in Egypt, 10,000 BC, and we worked with that priest to create various healings, and we built the pyramids by levitation. And I fell off my chair. I said, oh my God, she has to be referring to Edgar Cayce, or Ra-Ta, the previous life of Edgar Cayce. And I think that one discovery is what made me write the book, because it was like a cosmic footprint tying two disparate things together. And I said, It's too much of a coincidence. And in fact, at the time, I actually went to meet Carla Rucker. I wanted to look her in the eye. I wanted to see if she had read the Cayce material, if any of that stuff had bled through. She never read that story. She never knew that. She had read Cayce material and had studied his healing stuff, but never his past life as Ra-Ta. And then Carla Rucker's material had one other huge clue, which took me a long time to figure out what it meant. And what she said was, the priests of that time took the esoteric material from the Ra group, which included tarot cards, all kinds of metaphysical teachings. And I should mention the Ra group, through Carla Rucker, apparently was able to create light bodies that people could see and walked amongst the people in Egypt 10,000 years ago. And they said through Carla Rucker that they were sorry they did that because the priests of that time took their material and instead of using it to enlighten the masses, ended up using it to control people, to create fear. And I came to the conclusion that that was one great entree of the Illuminati into this realm, in the way the priesthood took the Ra contribution and made it negative. And then in Carla Rucker's material, I suggest, Alfred, you have Carla as a guest. She's extraordinary.
Right.
I'll create an introduction because we have become great friends at this point. And Carla Rucker, R-E-U-C-K-E.
I've got all of the
the
Law of One books here.
Right. So then she said that Egypt, all the Egyptian gods were of the negative, which meant they were probably Anunnakis, okay, of some sort or another. Right. It's a whole nother long story. She didn't say that, but that's one of the things I came to. Many of the god forms of the Old Testament and Egypt were Anunnaki,
right?
Who were vying for control of the population. And there was an attempt to change it with an Egyptian pharaoh, Akhenaten. And Carla Rucker said the Ra group identified Akhenaten as one of the few people throughout history that was talking to the Ra group, okay? Right. And so Akhenaten failed, but Akhenaten created, according to my research, Akhenaten was sending enlightened beings to live in caves. I think it was 1200 BC that he reigned. His wife was Nefertiti.
Right.
He was sending enlightened beings to caves that would become the Essenes, because the Ra group was needing a support group of people who were evolved and who could channel to bring Jesus in. And they were already starting that with Akhenaten.
Very good. Thank you for making that connection.
Yes. And now the big thing that this group soul, the Ra group, was saying is that we're at the end of a 75,000 year cycle.
Right.
And that, let me explain what that cycle is as I have come to understand it, because I look at it, I've learned it a little differently than a lot of people would talk about it. There's an energy that radiates from the center of the universe through creation and ends up on Earth. And All the universe, the entire universe, is actually made of this energy. It reforms itself, it becomes planets, it's our bodies. And as in the higher levels, it's more etheric and it flows. Well, the flow of this energy has to pass through all the galaxies, through the planets, and it's always being modified by what it passes through. And every 75,000 years, there's a configuration that goes through the galaxies. It's not just astrological, but the galaxies have a configuration to allow this energy to flow at its strongest amplitude for 75,000 years. We are in the middle of that flow right now. And what that means is, first of all, this energy has always been on our planet. Spiritual people meet, they have meditations, they have get-together, they bring this energy in. In Christianity, it was connected to the Holy Spirit, perhaps, or Shakti, or all the words for energy. And now that energy is more accessible than it ever has been throughout recorded history. But it may be accessible, but unless a human opens themselves up to the receiving of it, they miss it. One of the things that's happening as a result of that energy is the Earth itself is moving through a shift. And in simple terms, the Earth is going from third chakra to fourth chakra. Earth is alive. Earth creates an ambience for the beings that are in her field to grow. And up till now, the ambience has been third chakra. Third chakra is solar plexus. Solar plexus relates to power and individuality. So the major lesson has been power and individuality. The Earth, because of this energy flow, is right now, right in this moment, moving into a fourth chakra planet, which means it's going from power and individuality to compassion and empathy. Now, a person has to be empowered and they have to be individual before they can be in love. You can't love unless you are centered in your own individuality. So now the Earth is moving into a fourth chakra planet. And what these group souls are explaining is that in order for a human to continue on this upgraded Earth, their heart chakra has to be open slightly more than half, or else they don't fit. Their energy field won't fit. So they're explaining, there's going to be a division of souls. Those souls that go with the upgrade and those that are cycle repeaters. And the cycle repeaters have to repeat the lessons of individuality and empowerment in another cycle before they get another chance to graduate. So right now is this critical period, and when people talk, we may not be able to save the lower Earth from all the negative forces that are attacking it, but we can graduate this realm, and it takes having an open heart. And right now, if this resonates with someone, is a time to do a crash course on how to get your heart open. It doesn't mean you're bad if you don't have an open heart. It's hard to have an open heart in this realm because so many of the negative forces keep it closed. And what I did when I realized the stakes that were involved and that I was telling this to people, I said, I have to create an opportunity. I don't want to tell this to people and say, you got to graduate or else. So we have 3 conference calls a week. We'll talk about more of that later. There's this incredible energy on the line, and I have people opening their hearts. Right? I get emails from people. My heart opened on your conference call, and I never experienced that in my life. I have these group souls working with my calls, and I'm going to tell you how that evolved, because it's an incredible story. But people are shifting, and so that's one of the things I'm contributing now to the evolution of the planet and the evolution of people that want to graduate. And if you notice this idea of graduation, where some people are going to go with this new earth and others are going to be cycle repeaters. By the way, it's not a punishment to be a cycle repeater, because most of us are cycle repeaters already. It just means a series of lifetimes like we've already had, and another chance to learn how to master this realm. And if you notice, this whole idea very much parallels things that Jesus said. One will be taken, one will be left behind. The meek will inherit the earth, etc., etc. And it started to put together for me the idea that all this group's soul was connected to Jesus, because he knew about this, but he could never talk about it in this kind of sophisticated language because no one would understand it in those days. So he made it simple. And now, you have any questions, Alfred?
No, I really think that you have made an original contribution here by integrating the research on Jesus as an Essene with the research on Ra and the group soul and the Cayce readings and the Wilcock readings, and I just want to commend you on that.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It took me quite some time to be sure that I was right. When I say be sure, I'm going to tell you the story, because I don't want people to believe me. I tell people, don't believe anything I say, kick my tires. Well, while I was writing the Wilcock book in 2002, I got in the middle of a series of situations in my life that blew me out of the water. I mean, that made me think, am I crazy? Is this real? I kept thinking I must be making a mistake. This can't be happening to me. I'll tell you how it started. I had a new girlfriend, and we were driving from Los Angeles to Portland, Oregon, and it was pouring rain, and I did a prayer of protection. And at the end of the prayer, like a joke, I looked at the liner at the top of the car, and I said, "Does anybody want to talk to me?" She answered, and she said, "We're here. Do you have questions?" And I said, okay, she's playing along. She knows I'm writing this book. So I started asking some questions. And a few minutes later, she said, "That's the strangest thing that happened to me." And I had no idea what to make of it. I didn't know if it was positive. I didn't know if she was crazy. We continued to Portland, Oregon. And 3 days later, we were in a hotel. And I asked her, "Do you want to try that again?" And I'll put a tape recorder on. And she said, "Okay." And I said, "Does anybody want to talk to me?" Again, there's an answer. I didn't think there would be, but there was. They said, "We're here. Do you have questions?" And I said, "How come my girlfriend can do this?" And they said, "Your girlfriend's from another dimension. She came here to bring these messages in, and this is a very important connection." And then I asked, "How do I know she's not crazy and you're not part of her schizophrenia? Can you guys project a newspaper headline, predict a newspaper headline. And they said they could. And they said, watch for this headline in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I am combing through the newspapers, and there was the headline. And I said, oh my God, this is real. For the next 6 months, she would be tapping me on the shoulder. She'd be saying, they want to talk to you again. I take out my tape recorder. I am asking every question under the sun. And particularly, I'm asking all this stuff about the book I'm writing and about Edgar Cayce and the Ra Group. And they are giving me exactly the same answers that I was getting from Wilcock and Carla Ruckert. Finally, 4 months into this, I got a call from my brother-in-law in Florida. And he told me my sister was going in the hospital the next day, and they didn't think she would survive. And I did a channeling session, and I asked them, can you help my sister? And they said they could. My sister survives the operation. I'm thinking this has got to be coincidence. And 3 weeks later, I get another call from my brother-in-law, and he says something really weird happened. Joanne had to go in for tests, and the nurse said the cancer was completely gone, but there was something wrong with the test because her lupus disappeared, and lupus never goes away. And I said, oh my God, I have got a miracle here. And so I went back and I asked them. I mean, it was really casual. It was not much different than talking to you. And I said, how did you guys do that? And they said, we projected a filter into her blood and took the lupus out. And I said, I never heard anyone who channels report anything like this. In the meantime, the woman was totally freaking out over this. She was being negatively attacked. This was a really big deal. We were getting, I didn't understand all of this at the time. I do now. But I know that this is the kind of thing that can change our planet. And there were huge negative sources that didn't want this to happen. And she was the weak point. They were attacking her. She was, getting dysfunctional. And at somewhere, I think it was around September in 2002, I asked them, I said, I know this seems like it's really important, okay? I have no idea. It was a little bit embarrassing because I'm writing this book about Wilcock, and I think David was really disconcerted that I was having this experience. I used to call him and say, David, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And he wasn't sure. One of the things about channeling is that it's really hard to figure out if it's positive or negative, because the negative will look positive. And I'm willing to consider that maybe it's negative. Maybe the part of healing my sister was part of to get me to capitulate to them. I was evaluating it, but it did happen. And so in September of 2002, the woman left. She just got in her car and said, this is too crazy for me. And I remember thinking, well, you know what? That was too much responsibility. I said, I'll get on with my life. I'll finish the book. I'll be a regular kind of author type person. And a few weeks went by, and I had kind of a broken heart. And I called my old friend up, who we have been on again, off again for 30 years, but we're really, really great friends. And I told her, I'm really suffering. I have to get back to writing this book. Would you consider coming over? And she said, okay. She came over. And in the middle of the night, she woke me up and said, get the tape recorder out. And I said, no. And I got the tape recorder out, and I thought she was jealous. I thought she, I was thinking, this is impossible, okay? Well, I have a little conversation, and they said they're the same source, and that what I was doing was really important, and I could reach them through Terry. So for the next couple of months, I was just plying questions, trying to convince myself it was the same source. Because, you know what, it was a group soul, they didn't have a personality, so they were talking through the personality of the person that talked to them. It's not like, say, Bashar. If you listen to Bashar, Bashar has a personality. It's different with group souls. And this was not just any group soul. They said they were the council of Elohim. And so I Google the word Elohim, and I find things like the creators of the universe. The name for God, one of the names for God in the Old Testament. The name the Mormons used for God. And so I went to them and I said, can you, are you the same Elohim I'm reading about? And they said, we're part of the same. And I said, why are you talking to me? And they said, well, you're like a cosmic midwife. You know how to bring these things out into the world, and you don't have ego about it. Well, one of the things that happened when I was with, I'm going to call her DK because she prefers not to be public, the first woman, is I knew she was going to leave, and I asked them, I said, I think this is important. Can't you recommend someone that's going to find this important? Because we didn't have any money. We were living, we were running around. I started doing some shows again to pay the bills. We're running around, and she's like this fragile, petite person, and I'm dragging her all over the place. In the middle of it, she'd go, they want to talk to you again. I'm taking out my tape recorder, and I'm asking some of the most profound questions in the universe. And they're answering. They very rarely turn me down. And eventually, I just want to say, I decided that this was so important and that they were who they say they were. By the time we're finished, you'll probably be convinced, because I think you should be skeptical. I was skeptical. You should kick these tires really hard. But I put it in a book, and I'm giving it away for free. It's called The Creator Gods of the Physical Universe. Want to talk to you? Let's see here. And if you go to my website, intelligent-infinity.com, you can download it for free. And I thought I would give you, I asked them, I said, isn't there somebody that's going to find this important? Now, I was living in Los Angeles with DK, and it's just beginning of September, and they said, we suggest that you go to Mesa, Arizona, and you'll find a group there that finds this important. And I had no clue what I was going to find, and she left me before we ever got to Mesa. So I just dumped that. And then 3 weeks later, I'm with Terry, and we're talking to them again. And after 2 months, I said, I think maybe they are the same source. And I said, would it be good for Terry and I to go to Mesa? And they said it would have been better for you and DK to go, but you'll learn something if you go with Terry. So we went. Terry was working in LA as a legal secretary. I might have been living in my RV on the streets of LA. I don't remember at the time. And we drove to Mesa. We went to Motel 6. And we went out to have dinner in Mesa. And I asked the waitress, "What's Mason known for?" I was sure this was going to be a wild goose chase. I said, "What is Mason known for?" And she says, "Mormons." Now, I had looked up the word Elohim, and it said that's one of the words for God in the maybe the word for God in Mormon religion. And so I went back and I did a channeling with Terry, and I said, "You don't mean for me to introduce myself to the Mormons, do you?" They said, "Not the entire church. There's a small group who will be very interested in what you're doing." And I said, "How do I find that group? I'm only here for one day." And they said, "Go to the church on," I don't think I'll say the street name. They gave me a street name, and I looked in the yellow pages, and there was a church on that street. And I went there, and I told Terry, "You better stay in the motel. I might have to get out of there quick." I sat through the service. I went up to the bishop, and I said, "Do you have time to talk to me? I came all the way from LA to be here." And he looked at me with that bright-eyed look saying, "Oh, I've got a convert," and took me back into his office. And then I sat down and I said, "You know what? I have two personal relationships that both have had a voice come through them that say they were the Elohim, and they sent me to your church to introduce myself. Do you want to hear the story?" And he listened to me for 2 hours. And then he said, to my shock, "Would you be willing to tell your story to some of my church members?"
Wow.
And I then said, "Of course." We spent another day, and he drew a map. And hang on a second here. I have this, where is it? Somewhere in, oh, here it is. This is like, he picked up a postcard. I'm just doing this for people that are skeptical.
Sure.
I could make this up, okay? This is a postcard that was addressed to him, and you can see the little map over here that he drew.
Oops.
No. Oh, that you can see the address over here,
Okay.
of where we were supposed to go. So now, the next day, we go to somebody's home, and there's a few people there. And now I bring Terry with me, okay? Because I figured they weren't going to throw me out. And I'm talking about this. I'm reading some of the channelings. And in the middle of it, Terry says, they want to say something. And she looks at me to get my approval. And I'm saying, do I want to say yes to this? What's going to come through her? Although the quality of stuff coming through her was always positive. It's always scary. It's scary when you do something publicly because you can never take it back if something negative comes through. So I said, okay, let's go for it. And so they looked at the group and they said, she said, they want you to know they are hearing your prayers. And everyone in the room started to cry. And I remember driving off from that thing in Mesa saying, I think they are who they say they are. I mean, believe me, having these conversations, I didn't believe it. It was very hard for me to believe that I'm talking to a group soul that created the universe. And I have these two women saying they want to talk to you again, and they're answering every question under the sun. I guess I must be making a mistake. But they did heal my sister. And now I left these Mormons in tears. And we went back to LA, and I started asking loads of questions about the Mormons. And I came up with something that's extraordinary, and it made sense, and it's like a missing piece of a puzzle. Our planet has been in deep doo-doo. It's been under the control of a lot of negative sources, and you know that. That's one of the things you talk about all the time, right, Alfred?
Sorry?
Yeah, I'm saying all the control aspects of the negative on our planet.
Right.
It's the reptilians, right? Well, the Elohim had a group of people, of Elohim souls, that were willing to take bodies in this realm. Like the Ra group had souls. Remember,
could you back up again
and soul of Gravis.
Yeah, could you say that again, because you broke up, and it's very important.
Okay, the Elohim, there were a number of Elohim souls that were willing to take bodies in this realm. But whenever they do, in the past, not whenever, but often, they become negative because they're extremely powerful and they can control other beings in this realm. And if we get to it, I can tell you the history of the universe and how this all got screwed up, because I've asked them and it makes lots of sense. But they were part of the creation of the Mormon religion. They were connected to Joseph Smith in some way, and they wanted to create a doctrine that Elohim souls could come into this realm and not get lost or not go negative. And it's one of the reasons they had polygamy, is so they could have more babies and have more Elohim souls. So the implication here is that the firstborn of all the Mormons were Elohim souls. And I ran that against my own experience. And it's very interesting what I came up with, because Elohim souls are different than Ra souls when they take a body. Elohim souls tend to be more angelic, more loving, and more expressive of their love, but no wisdom of the realm, because the Elohim's experience of this realm is all vicarious. And so now they're coming in here and they don't know how to function, and that's why they get caught up in the negative. Like the Mormon religion is the only religion that says when you die, you'll go back to making planets and stars. And if you look at Mormons, I came up with some very interesting observations. Mormons take care of each other better than any other religion on the planet. I have a friend that's a Mormon, and they paid her rent when she ran out of money. They have the group's soul collective memory of being part of each other. Mormons tend to be fairly attractive people and fairly wholesome, a lot of energy, because they're new souls in this realm, their DNA is not corrupted, and it's not because of their religion that that's true. It's because they're Elohim souls. Mormons can be very industrious. They tend to be very focused and very successful when they put their minds to it. And finally, Mormons do not have street smarts. You will never find, maybe someone will find this. When I say Mormons, I'm talking about, not every Mormon is an Elohim soul. There's people that are converts and whatever. But in general, Mormons do not have the wisdom of this realm because they're new to it. And what I learned was the Elohim are spirit forms, energy forms, and they have vicarious wisdom because they watched us for trillions of years. But they don't have the experience of being trapped here. And the Ra group has the experience being trapped here. So what I learned was I'm now connecting with both of these group souls. The Elohim group soul is very powerful. They can project energy into this realm. They can rearrange molecules. They have the, how would you say it? The backdoor program to the universe. And they don't violate free will. They need to be asked for help. And we have seen so many miracles happen around the work that I'm doing. And I've watched it as a skeptic. And I said, let's see what happens if I do this, see what happens when I do that. And to give you an example of one of the first phenomena I had with the Elohim was in 2004. And the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce had just come out. And I was giving my first public talk at something called the Holistic Living Expo in San Diego. And Terry was with me, and she was selling books outside. And I was giving this talk, and I could see this energy in the room. I've always been sensitive to energy. There's certain people, when I was younger, I would go to different spiritual teachers, and I could feel the energy in the room. And suddenly, I'm giving a talk, and that energy is in my room, and it's stronger than anything I had ever experienced anywhere. And I'm looking at it, it's dancing around everybody. And I said, what's that? When my talk was over, people rushed out of the room to buy books. And they were lining up, and they were telling Terry, I could see auras in the room. I never saw auras before. I could see light in the room. That must be what people are talking about. And so I didn't talk about my personal experience. I mean, my book had just came out. I was already out on a huge limb saying that I wrote a book that Edgar Cayce came back. And I didn't know how to even begin to include my experience in a public talk without thinking I would lose all my credibility. But after that talk, we did a channeling. And I said, could you explain that energy that was in the room? And they said, that was us. We were helping you. And I said, this is too much. I can't handle this. Up to that point, I was getting the most incredible information about how everything works. And now they're telling me they can project into a room and people could feel them in the room. And I asked them, well, I did some more talks. Every time I do a public talk, that happens. And a certain amount of people in that room get blown away. Their depressions go away. It's like this loving, beautiful energy sweeps through the room and transports the people. Now, I'll show you a little thing here. I was doing, somebody had asked me to do a radio show, and they didn't like my promotion picture because I was wearing glasses. In fact, I was wearing sunglasses, and I have this favorite picture of mine where I think I look a little like John Lennon. And so I was doing my spiritual talks and using that picture. And she said, you need another picture. So I said, Terry, let's take my picture. Terry took my picture, and I looked at it, and I said, I can't stand the way I look. I need to change my mood. And I said, why don't we call them in and see if I can't look better? And we have this little invocation we've come up with that calls them in and brings them present. And so we did it. We took another picture. I looked at it, and I still didn't like it. And then a month later, I looked at the pictures, and something amazing revealed itself. In the second picture, my chest was covered in pink light. And then I went back and I asked them, I mean, it was obvious. There's no other explanation. I said, could you explain the pink light? And they said, well, you called on us. Our color is pink. I'll show you the pictures.
Right. Wow.
See it?
Yeah.
And then another time, I was giving a talk in somebody's backyard in Hollywood, and somebody took my picture, and there was another picture of a guy in exactly the same position, sitting next to another guy, and he just looked normal. This is how my picture came out.
Wow, you're totally bathed in like light, pink light.
Right. Now, eventually, I asked them, I said, was Terry ever anybody famous? Okay? And out of the clear blue sky, they told me to look up St. Catherine of Siena.
Oh.
Now, I never heard of St. Catherine of Siena, but I said, okay, I'll look up St. Catherine. I went on the internet. I found the story of St. Catherine. And you know who St. Catherine was?
No, you tell me.
St. Catherine was this young woman, 800 AD, I think.
1300.
1300 AD. You sure? Okay. 1300 AD or something. And she wasn't a saint, of course, but she would go into the local church in Siena, Italy, and they would write down everything she said because they thought God was speaking to them through her. And St. Catherine's dialogues with God are still for sale on Amazon. Obviously she was sainted, so they recognized, the Catholic Church recognized her. Her main emphasis in her channelings were trying to clear the corruption of the church. And my take is it was the Ra group, again, coming through St. Catherine. And here, Terry is in my life, this lifetime, and she's channeling the Elohim, right? Now, here is the striking thing. Check this out. Can you see that? It's a picture of St. Catherine in the middle.
Yeah.
And Terry on the side.
Yeah.
And they have a very striking similarity.
Right.
And then here's another picture of St. Catherine in a more serious mood. And I read the story of St. Catherine, and it sounded like Terry's personality. And I was sure. Now, I told you, Terry's sitting next to me. And I was going to take a moment because this is right now, in this time period, this has been evolving now for 12 years. And we do conference calls 3 times a week. We have people sending us questions. And we ask them, right?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We ask them right on the conference call the questions, and we channel the answers. Mostly questions on how to get your life together, how to clear your patterns. And we do a Sunday call, which is, I call it a personal and planetary healing session. What I've learned is, I've learned this by doing it, not by reading it, although I've read it in the past, is that when humans come together with a high intent, it starts a blending of their energies, a blending of their souls. And That's what Jesus meant when he said, when two or more are gathered, I am also present. When we blend our energies in a room, we become a big enough receiving station for this love light energy of the higher realms to merge with our energies and become visible in the room. Or visible is not the right word, but people who are sensitive can feel it. And that these two groups' souls are just waiting for this to occur. And I started to realize I would go into a room, and every time I gave a talk, it would happen. But I never talked about that. It would just happen while I was talking about other things. And I started talking about it. I started telling my story to people. And I mean, blew people away. I mean, because the anecdotal evidence that this is real is just too high. And then I asked them, I said, if we do a conference call, can you bring that energy in on a conference call? And they said they could. So it started, this was about in 2006, 2007. I started as an experiment. People were paying attention. I had mailing lists. And I said, please come to my call. And I started reading channelings and playing channelings. And people could feel this energy on the line. You don't have to channel them to bring the energy in. In fact, are you feeling energy, Alfred?
Oh yes, yes. In fact, if Terry wants to come on, that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, just because I talk, I become like, I've understood how it works. So when I talk about them, they start coming in.
Yeah.
They are so delighted to make connections down here. And so what happens is when there's a group energy that's huge and you put intentions into that group energy, you can cause miracles to happen. And their criteria is for the highest good of all concerned and honoring free will. Now, the idea of group energy works with both the negative and the positive. The negative can, they have satanic circles, covens, whatever, people trying to use group energy to control things. And they won't come in to those kinds of circles because there's not the honoring of free will and not the lack of creation of fear. It's for control. And this planet, on the other side, there's 10 times more positive energies than there are negative. That's something they've said, and I think it's true. And if enough people start invoking the positive energies on the other side, they can make things go in different directions. The truth of the matter is, it's not them doing it, it's us doing it. Because the law of one, they're us, we're them. It's all one. They are a higher aspect of us. We're a lower aspect of them. Some of us were them who came here and volunteered just to do this. That's why we took bodies. But once you're here, you don't know how to do it. And I am helping to facilitate this interaction between realms. 3 conference calls a week, hundreds of things on my archived website. And when people start getting this energy and they want to move through this shift, they go nuts over my work. They start listening to all the calls.
Now, how can people participate in these conference calls?
First thing is go to my website, intelligent-infinity.com, and sign up for the free book, which is The Creator Gods of the Physical Universe Want to Talk to You. And that will help give you the mindset. What they say is, as you study us, we study you. They can feel your energy as you read their words. And basically, I mean, I've asked questions, and this was like, did this in 2005. I have some more books to write, but while I got the book open, I'll just, like, when they first came through in 2002, and I said, how come my girlfriend can do this? They said, good evening. We bring forth to you knowledge of the higher intergalactic species. This is to be our first recorded transmission to you, and we are pleased to announce our engagement of technological meshing with your channel so that we may bring forth to you information of a needed higher caliber for transmission and integration at this particular frequency and station, and knowing pertinent to the incoming questions. Have you questions this evening, Mr. Wynn? And I said to myself, how could she possibly make that up, right? And then Terry, to give you an example of how they sound through Terry, early on, before I had this experience of lights in the room and all this stuff, I asked the question, I said, how can one know one is really having a connection with an interdimensional source as with the Elohim? What are the physical signals and evidence that would confirm that one is having a connection? And their answer, through Terry, there can be a light appearing to you, surrounding and providing a loving space around you. It's a love light surrounding you that you can sense. This is one of the first signs of connection. If you are directed to the light, an answer may form in your mind as if a thought. You must use discernment in accepting an answer. If an answer does not fit your question or fit your sense of what is right, you may have been contacted by a negative source that has intercepted the connection line. Do not ever pursue this. Reset and connect with the Elohim source or the Ra source. The thought will have a resonance within you of correctness. Do not accept an answer unless it resonates as a correct and informative answer. That's through Terry. And Terry's here, and thank you for being so patient. I'm going to manually move this to her. And Terry, you want to move a little closer? Here we go. Just move right up here. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll move this back a little bit.
Just to give you a heads up, we have about 20 minutes left in this segment. We can always do a follow-on program, but we have time limitations for today.
Okay.
Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. I'm honored to be on with you.
You know, one of the things that's a really interesting question is that very time that Terry said they want to talk to you.
Sorry, you know, you're breaking up. Hello? Hello?
Oh, wait, okay, I'm a little further from the microphone over here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're off camera.
Oh, hang on. That's the.
Yeah.
I know. Hang on. Okay, my microphone is working. I just wanted to see if it was working.
Yeah.
And here.
Yeah.
Now,
could you move closer together? Could you move to the left?
Yeah.
Wynn.
I can see myself. So yeah.
Move to the left. Good. Move Move close, close, close to Terry, to the left. Great. Thank you.
All
Okay,
right.
I'm going to push things along because we're a little bit pressed for time here. So please, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the amazing things is what happened when Terry woke me up and said, get the tape recorder out. And Terry, why don't you share your experience?
I was hoping that they would come through me, and I felt pressure on my head. The reason I was hoping that they would come through me was Wynn invited me once to a channeling that Daphne did, and I asked if I could also channel them, and they said that I could. I had had training as a channel in 1995 by a channel that had been a police psychic, and she was very knowledgeable and taught a course, taught me how to channel. I would, by the way, invite Wynn to the channelings of Cheryl Taylor, and Wynn would never go. He would say, "No, I don't want to get into that." And I'd say, "They're starting right now and you'll love it." And he'd say, "No." And he would drop me off and leave. So I was hoping they would come through me, and it was late at night and Wynn had fallen asleep. And I felt pressure on my head, on the right side of my head. And I recognized it as being the energy of the same group that Daphne had channeled. And I'm supposed to say DK.
Right.
So Wynn was sleeping, so I said to them, "Could you talk to me and we'll get acquainted and get to know each other because Wynn's sleeping?" And they said, "No, we want to talk to Wynn." So I woke him up, told him to get the tape recorder out, and it started with an amazing series of talks at that point, with Wynn asking questions and they coming through with answers. At first, I had long pauses in my channelings because I would say to them, "Are you sure that's right? How do I know that's right?" And they would say it again. And then we'd go through it about 3 times. After about 3 times, I'd say, "Okay, I'll say it." And so I got to trust them. It took me a couple years to be able to trust them and feel their energy, but I always felt more intelligent. For instance, if somebody would ask a question of me, I would say, I don't know the answer, and I don't know how anybody would know the answer to that. And then we bring in the Elohim, and all of a sudden I'd feel much more intelligent, and the answer's obvious. And so it's been a real education for me and a multi-dimensional expansion, and to be able to see what it's like to be them as opposed to how it's like to be me. Thank you.
You know, we constantly get testimonials from people. Like there's a guy I think he's in Minnesota, who drives a school bus. And he had sent a question in for one of our Wednesday question and answer sessions. And he said, "I am driving a school bus in the worst part of town. The people get on my school bus, they fight with each other, they've got knives. I'm scared every time I drive. What can I do?" And so we told him, "Well, just go in early before everyone gets on your bus and call on us and bring in the light. And then as each person walks in, put the light around them and see what happens." So about 4 months later, he says he's got the most peaceful school bus in town. And everyone is just loving him and saying, they're happy to see him. It's like, what's happening? It's not that they're doing it. He's doing it, but he's lifting his own vibration. There's a veil around the earth, and it's very hard to get through the veil. And most of us are just bouncing back and forth, and suddenly you get through these connections this experience of great expansion through the veil. And you feel it. It's hard to explain it until you experience it. Some of you might be feeling a sense, if you've listened to this video this long, might be feeling some little bit of energy or expansion. And that's them. That's how they work. But that's us.
Yes. Now, let me ask you a question. We don't have a time for it today, but is it possible to schedule a program in the future with the both of you to have direct communication on the air with the Elohim?
Of course it's possible.
Okay. I would like very, very much to do that, so myself and our viewing audience could participate in that energy, because we have done a series of remote energy healings with, for example, Dr. Joe Mara, and he and I would get on a healing, and he would do meditation healings with me, and then people can watch the video at any time and place, and they get the healing.
We would love to do that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So let's schedule that. Now, here's the thing. If I could beg your indulgence, I want to kick a little tires here, because if I don't kick some tires, my viewers are going to be very upset.
Okay, kick some tires.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And this is, and so we could go through some technical stuff. First of all, as you know, if you're in the scientific study of reincarnation, for example, as Dr. Ian Stevenson was at the University of Virginia Medical School, typically what would happen is that you have children between the age of 2 and 5 years old, 2 and 6 years old. They have spontaneous memories of the prior lives. And so that they would say, oh, I was a merchant in the next town over, and I had this, that, and the other thing, and blah, blah, blah. And then you'd go over and you'd inspect it, and there's a whole report that's done. Now, one of the things that jumped out at me was that Edgar Cayce had left instructions that if anybody came to Virginia Beach, he said, here's a test that anybody who comes here has to take this test if he or she announces that they're a reincarnation of me. And what happened is that David Wilcock refused to take that test.
Mm-hmm.
So doesn't that disqualify him from the get-go?
Well, I have the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that question. I think I have the answer. If you think it disqualifies him, it disqualifies him. But there's another take on it. When Edgar Cayce said that, it was not the group's soul, his source, saying it. It was Edgar Cayce saying it. And there's a reason why they want to have a certain mystery to all of this. And the reason is that absolute proof that somebody is someone causes people to give up, defer their power to that person. Every time, like they said, we don't want to do miracles anymore, at least publicly, like happened with Jesus, because it causes people to give up their power. And this is not about giving up your power. It doesn't matter if the Elohim has been God, if they created the universe. I asked them, I said, do you really like it when people worship you? And they said, no. They said, we're like your big brothers in another dimension. Some of you are us, you're heroes for coming into that dimension. We want to co-create with you. We want to cooperate with you. If David Wilcock was able to answer that question, he would have created a bunch of people to totally believe in him and said, what should we do next? And that would not have been positive. And he probably has enough people doing that anyway. So that's my take on the answer to that. Edgar Cayce said that, but it didn't come in his trance state. It didn't, as far as I know, it didn't come from the group soul that was speaking through him. It came from his conscious self.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to.
Does that sound?
It does, because your book really concentrates on the transfer through the group soul and really explains it in the larger context. And it's a different study of reincarnation than comes through in the normal parapsychological study of reincarnation, say that an Ian Stevenson would do, or if you go to the Journal of the American Society or the British Society of Psychical Research, they do a far different type of study. You know, it's more, oh, well, they had a wound here and the wound is right there. And, you know, it's much more in physical characteristics, and they don't go into the depth that you have from the interdimensional characteristics. But I think you had a different purpose here, because you're actually doing interdimensional revelation. And that's what I deeply appreciate about your work. I just wanted to say that to you personally.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Now, let me go to the second question. And because the second question is a bit lengthy, but I just want to set some context. And this will be the last question, and then we'll have to sign off quickly, but with the knowledge that we'll be setting up a second program, and we'll be scheduling that second program in the future. Okay. One of the regularities that you set out is, quote, lack of desire for public acclaim. You say this book was written at the insistence of the author yourself over Wilcock's initial vehement resistance. It was only at the author's insistence that many would benefit as a result of the public release of this book that Wilcock finally gave some support to this project. And it's true, because yesterday I went to divinecosmos.com and I went to the search function and I entered in David Wilcock plus reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, and there's no results. Okay?
Okay.
There's no results, which is kind of amazing. Okay. There is one article which you have to get on Google, and then that'll take you back to that site. But it's a tough search, okay? You got to be an expert to track it down.
Well, you know what happened?
No. But wait. Let me get to the question, and then you can fill us all in, okay? Here, and it's a kick the tires question, okay? This is coming kind of a devil's advocate, and we all know who the devil's advocate works for, but I don't work for the devil. I'm, just trying to get just the facts, okay? And this is, and by the way, I am a friendly advocate. Here in Vancouver, there's the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which was founded by Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And a member recently said there's 4 books that are really powerful that changed her mind. And she mentioned the 2 books by David Wilcock, The Source Field Investigation and The Synchronicity Key. And then she said, and the 2 books by Alfred Weber, Exopolitics, and my newest book, The Dimensional Ecology of the Omniverse. So people are finding a synchronicity between these two wanderers. So I think I understand something of David's story. However, I also have been involved in a journalistic expose of an event that David was involved in. Okay. As I mentioned to you, just this past week, David published a dream that he had that Benjamin Fulford is the reincarnation of Ben Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States.
Funny you should ask that.
And
Alfred?
I know Ben Fulford. Ben interviewed me when I was in Japan, and a lot of people are very skeptical of that one. So what's your comment?
It's funny. I hate to comment on that. I'll comment privately on that to you.
Okay.
But let me just say one thing, just in a general comment. Once the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce came out, David, I believe this is true. I don't like to assign motivation, but I'll say it. David thought he could reach more people by being scientific, by being articulate, than channeling. And he pretty much stopped putting his channelings out.
Yeah.
And another thing, if you recall, I talked about group energy and bringing in high matrix souls. Well, Edgar Cayce always had group energy around him. He had his wife, he had his scribe, the woman who was a scribe, he had the Search for God group. He had a protective group energy that allowed for these highest sources to come in. When you're channeling a matrix, not an individual entity, I have found this is pretty important because they don't come in without that energy present. Edgar Cayce had it. To my knowledge, David Wilcock has not created that for channeling. Although sometimes he'll go up in front of an audience and he'll start speaking and he'll start channeling to the group energy in the audience, and it can be awesome. But when you think that David Wilcock knows everything because he was Edgar Cayce, it's not true. Not even close. He's made mistake after mistake after mistake in various predictions. And that he is not wanting to present himself as a channel this lifetime. But he was channeling when I wrote the book, and I believe his channelings were authentic, wise, and helpful, and certainly changed my life.
Yeah. And in fact, you go into that in depth when you start presenting a comparison of the three successive lives.
John Bainbridge.
Yeah, Bainbridge, and then Cayce, and then Wilcock, and you look at various tendencies, including a tendency to go for the dark side, or at least, have a battle with the dark side, Bainbridge in particular. And let me finally bring that up here. This is where David Wilcock was an attendee at a meeting that took place in Pennsylvania that was sponsored by some very dark entities. That was it was on a former U.S. Navy base at Warminster, Pennsylvania, and there's allegedly a nest or a base of negative grays underneath that, and that meeting was supposed to be of the creme de la creme of the exopolitics people. I was initially invited to it, and then I was disinvited from it because I guess some of the black ops people thought that I would bust it if I were there. But David, according to my sources who were there, went there. He insisted on a stretch limousine, and then he proceeded to dominate a lot of the conversation there. And I engaged, I had a host who a guest who's also a psychic, and we did a program, an expose of that, and showed people who attended that. And her thing was that the purpose of that meeting was orchestrated by the black ops people in the military industrial complex, so that all the people who went, and they're kind of some of the leaders inside the UFO exopolitics, would get their consciousness hijacked by the Tao Greys and mind control. So they'd be mind controlled by the dark agenda, and they would be carrying out the dark agenda now. And I spoke at the same conference as David last year down in Palm Desert, California. And he showed up with these bodyguards, and he was kind of out of his body. I mean, it was a little bit, it was cognitive dissonance. I'm just really sorry to say. So for me, it looks like he's off his mission. I could be wrong. But a lot of the people in the audience were saying, this doesn't make sense. Here's David Wilcock showing up with these bodyguards he had the bodyguards scanning us with an arm. There was an armed guard with a pistol at a metaphysics conference. Armed guard with a pistol was 5 feet from us. David was enjoying the fact that he had this armed guard. There was just a bunch of audience people there. How do you feel about that?
Well, I didn't know about it, but it doesn't surprise me. Okay? I mean, I don't think it's wise for me to take David's inventory. I wrote the book. The book brings through the messages of this, I believe, this higher source. I carefully chose the channelings. I think they're very positive. I think David did an incredible service for allowing that to occur. Personally, I think that book is more important than his other work and whatever he's doing. But that's my opinion. And I don't want to be here creating judgment on David. And I mean, certainly not publicly, because he's my co-writer and we work together. And
no, it's not judgment. It's just observation. Yeah. For example, if I were to take an observation, I would say, well, one observation is that he's just kind of taken a zigzag because he went kind of way over into the glitz side of it, and as you say, has gotten away from the deep connection to source, and somehow now in his lifetime maybe has to rebalance a bit to really connect more to source in the remainder of his life, to really balance out that, and to put out, I mean, because Wanderers, now he's doing his TV work, but Wanderers exists to really bring all this to public light. And I said, well, what's the function of Cayce as a reincarnation? I said, wow, man, that gives you a huge PR boost, right?
Right.
So why would he want to cover that up?
Well, after the book came out, David and I, pretty shortly thereafter, went our separate ways. Okay? And it seems to me they were wanting someone to be a focal point for their energies in this realm. Okay? Right. And that David did not want the job. He wanted
by they you mean the Ra or the Elohim?
Well, be more the Ra group in terms of.
Okay.
And David thought that you can do things to get attention and take cheap shots sometimes. Like, making like you know what's going to happen. There's going to be disclosure in November, and this is going to happen, and and the Chinese the Chinese ninjas are going to save us, and it's kind of like you get. I've been watching this phenomena where there's a lot of attention focused on David, and then things keep falling through, and he's got amazing resilience to keep coming back for the next one and the next one and the next one. And I just decided he's doing what he's doing. I'm not going to judge him. I personally haven't read his books, and I don't want to read his books because I'm afraid he'll accuse me of stealing something out of them.
Okay.
And David was, Alfred, when you get into the depths of the duplicity in this realm, and the disinformation, it's like it gives you a headache.
I know.
I mean, David was thinking, because I was having this channeling experience. I know he was thinking I was negative. Okay, this must be negative. We couldn't be having this experience. I'll tell you the truth. When I first heard about you, I said, geez, it sounds like Alfred's saying ETs are going to come save us. And that's not the message I'm getting. Maybe Alfred's disinfo. do you know what won me over? It's like I saw your interview with Laura Eisenhower.
Oh, yeah. And
I said, you know what? I think Alfred has got a good heart, high intent. I trust this guy,
Right.
But it's like, even when people are trustworthy, they have to jump through hurdles.
A lot of hoops.
Where you get it.
Yeah, good. Well, look, that's a good note on which to end part one, which is our initial interview. I am so grateful that you did reach out and contact us, and I'm sorry that we have to end it here.
Alfred, we could be going on for 3 days.
No. This is the longest single interview on Exopolitics TV.
Okay.
And I will be in touch shortly to set up a follow-on schedule interview, and of course we'll be sending you the link to this interview. But thank you so much, and I'm sorry that I can't spend more time with you, but we're up against time. Yeah.
In conclusion, can I have like 30 seconds more?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm giving away my book. We're doing 3 conference calls a week. I decided my work was so important I wasn't going to charge for it, except we were going broke. So I started with this product that I tagged along that has been incredible. And if you go to my website, you'll see a little link to it. And what I do is we started importing energy pendants. We put them in stores in Sedona, and there started to be a glow around them. People, and I started to get the idea that maybe they were helping. And people wear them all the time. And I have a website. Go to my website. There's a little link, an Intelligent Infinity, in the upper right-hand corner. And we sell them. If you use Alfred's name as the discount code, you get a discount. They're only $25. They look like this. Let me see here. Here, we guarantee them for 6 months, and we get very few coming back. People get more energy, more focus, more protection. Nobody sells anything like this. And with Alfred's name, they're $25. And I didn't ask you for permission to do a commercial. I normally would have, but we didn't want to talk. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you both for being with us. And we will talk to you soon again.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. And special thanks to Terry for carrying the torch to make this happen. She's in the background, but I would not only would I not be here tonight, I might not be alive if it wasn't for Terry. So,
well, Terry, thank you very much.
I appreciate your work, and I run into it sometimes on the internet, and I watch you.
Oh, good. Well, a big hello to Sedona.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bless you all. Thank you all for listening.
Okay.